Hi everyone, Lewis here, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys another update for the DayZ Standalone. So this week we don't actually have a video as we did the previous week, but instead we've got a lot of images and a lot of really interesting information which we didn't know about before. So as usual, I will be starting off with the images, which for this week we mainly cover the races found in the game and a new area, which I'll talk about a bit more in depth very soon. And then once we've done for screenshots, of course, I'll talk a bit about the actual dev post. And this dev post is definitely the biggest I've ever had before, and there's lots of interesting information, so yeah. First off, for this image, I'm not going to talk too much about it because last week when I did show you guys a racist picture, everyone called me a massive racist. So just to avoid that conversation entirely, this screenshot just shows off the 3 races which are available in DayZ Standalone when you are first creating your character. There's really not anything too special about the first 3 screenshots, but the ones after that are something which I can talk a bit more in detail about. So this one is again just showing off one of the races in the DayZ Standalone. This is the black race. That's not racist, before anyone says it's racist, it's the black race, it's not African American, she might not be American, I don't know. And this one over here is the Asian race. Like I said, nothing too special, so now to move on to the new area which has been screenshotted for this week. So I actually went ahead and researched this a bit more just so I could find out where exactly this place is and the name of the city, since it does have a screenshot of the sign. You'll see that in the next screenshot. And from what I've seen, I'm pretty sure this is just northwest of Chernarus. I'll just mark it on the map right here. You can see that's where it is, and you can see the key points which I could work this out from is the radio tower in the background on the right, and the hills on the left are exactly the same. The roads are completely different in the 2 screenshots, comparing the Armor 2 normal Chernarus to the Chernarus Plus map, which is obviously in this new screenshot, but that's definitely where it is. It's just northwest of Chernarus. I think that's kind of weird. I would have thought it would be further inland and maybe further away from the big cities, but it's nice to see there is some locations which aren't necessarily just on the shore, because obviously in DayZ with Chernarus, all the big cities were on the shore. Berezino, Electro, Chernigorsk were all on the shore, so it's nice to see there's somewhere inland to go which is actually worthwhile. They're replacing lots of the cities with actual interiors, so pretty much all the cities you've ever seen inland on the original Chernarus map are actually going to have a purpose now. You'll be able to go inside those cities and find some good loot from there. You can see, if you do actually zoom in some of these screenshots as well, pretty much all the buildings on the screenshot are enterable, including the apartments. So the next screenshot, like I said, actually shows off a post which has the name of a city on it, and I went ahead and asked my Russian friend, since of course Chernarus is a Russian map, so all of the signs are in Russian, and it actually translates to Novoselki. You can even put it in Google Translate if you can somehow type those characters out, and it will translate to Novoselki. So this is similar to all of the other location names in Chernarus and some of the other maps for Armor, in that the name's actually based off a real location found in Russia. So it's not really anything significant about knowing the name of the city, Novoselki, but it's still nice to know what the name is, so you'll have a bit of an advantage or something when moving into DayZ Standalone. It is pretty old news that, of course, the Chernarus Plus map isn't just going to be a rework in terms of interiors, but it's going to feature lots of new locations, this being one of them. The city as a whole looks really cool. Like I said earlier, if you do zoom in, most of the buildings do look enterable. The big apartments I'm not too sure about, because in Armor you could not enter them, and looking at all the screenshots I can't actually see anywhere where I can definitely say that does look enterable. So the big apartments on the left of the screenshot, I'm not really sure if you can get in them, but pretty much every other building inside the city is enterable. Despite that, you can see on the massive apartments in this screenshot, on the top I've still got a little door, so there is maybe the possibility of a building still featuring an elevator, as it did in Armor, so you can simply go up and down it, but you can't actually check the actual interiors of a building. But to be honest, like I said, it is really hard to tell in the screenshot. This is just another view of Novoselki. Like I said earlier, if you do zoom in on the picture, all the buildings on the screen right now are 100% enterable, with the only one which I'm unsure about, like I've said, being the big apartments on the right side of the screenshot. Since the city is pretty near to the coast, you're not going to expect to see any real military loot or any high-grade gear inside the city, but rather some other location for fresh spawns to go ahead and loot. Since it is really near to Chernigorsk, if there happens to be too many bandits or something like that, you can just go ahead northwest and go to this city right here. There is a possibility of this city actually being linked to Chernigorsk, but since you don't get an angle looking towards that direction, it is hard to tell whether the 2 cities are connected or not, but I'd assume that the 2 cities are completely separate and aren't connected in any way other than the fact that, of course, they are right beside each other. So this is the final screenshot of Novoselki, and you can see the right side is a bit more exposed in this screenshot. You can see a road going straight towards Chernarus, some more apartments on the right side. So like I said, this is definitely a place, like I said, for fresh spawns to go and get some mediocre loot. I can't see any military spawns in any of the buildings in the city. There's nothing like a fire station as you would find in Chernigorsk and Electro. So like I said, not going to get anything special from here, but rather get some bits and bobs, some accessories, maybe a pistol or something like that. Anyway, that's all the screenshots for this dev post, but now I'm going to be looking at the actual things which Rocket talked about for this week. There's lots of information which we haven't heard about before, and like I said, this is the biggest dev post we've had to date. So the first 2 paragraphs are simply talking about one of the developers who was actually locked in prison in Greece is finally back. There's a screenshot of Rocket along with Ivan. Ivan is of course the person on the right, Rocket's a person on the left, which is talked about a bit in the bottom paragraph in that they met up for a design meeting in the Czech Republic, and this is the picture of them right here. Nothing else really special about this, but Ivan was one of the main people working on the Chernarus Plus map, which is of course a massive part of the DayZ Standalone transition, so this is without a doubt going to help the development of the DayZ Standalone as a whole. So next paragraph is talking a bit about the project team expansion. Rocket in the past week or so has been posting on his Twitter, basically asking for people who would be interested in helping Rocket with DayZ Standalone. The main thing which Rocket's been looking for is 3D artists, I'm guessing, for some more props and all that kind of stuff. So again, not really anything too special about this paragraph, but because the team is a bit bigger than it was maybe a few months ago, and this should mean that the updates for DayZ Standalone should be a bit more regular once it is released. I will talk about this a bit more in a few minutes because the actual regularity of DayZ Standalone updates is mentioned right at the end of the dev post. So the next paragraph talks about the multiplayer testing. Of course, the internal closed testing is still something which is going on, but next week we've got a plan for the large-scale capacity testing, which is basically going to see how much a server can hold in its current state until, I guess, it just crashes or something along those lines. I'm not really sure who's going to be invited to the testing. This might be a sign of closed alpha coming out very soon. Of course, I am invited to a closed alpha, so if that is the case, I will definitely keep you guys up to date with that. But again, not really anything too much more to say about this paragraph. The next 2 paragraphs talk a bit about the architecture for the game. If you didn't already, DayZ Standalone is going to be moving kind of into an MMO model. It's something we've been working on for a few weeks, and again, just some more work on making the game more of an MMO than, of course, a DayZ mod, which isn't anything like an MMO. There's not really anything confirmed by this paragraph. It will be interesting to see how exactly the MMO model transition is going to work compared to the DayZ mod, but I guess for that, we're just going to have to wait until the game is in closed alpha. This is something Rocket's talked about many times before, and it's a bit about character development, just being able to get in tune with your character and actually start to make a bond with your character, so that way when your character finally dies, you're really sad. I know it's kind of sadistic, but that's how the game is going to be. So character development is going to be a huge part of the game. So choosing your race, maybe changing your starting equipment in terms of actual clothes which you've got on, choosing your gender, whether you're male or female, is all going to be something which I'm guessing you will be able to select once you do first create your character. The next 2 paragraphs talk about the inventory system, which is something we literally haven't seen before. Even in the video, they actually covered up the part when Rocket went into his inventory, so we'll have literally no idea what exactly it is going to look like. But the second paragraph does actually say that they are redesigning all of the weapons so that you're going to have a more customizable feel for the actual attachment system which is going to be in the game. It's something which has been confirmed for a while. Obviously changing out silencers, scopes, all that kind of stuff is going to be something you can do with your weapons. Again, this is tying back to the customization of your character. There's just so much customization in the game with not only your character, but of course, as we're talking about right here, your weapons. This paragraph just talks about something which I did mention earlier. Ivan being back from Greece, this now means that since he was a huge part of the Chernarus Plus effort, transferring from Armor with Chernarus all the way into Chernarus 2 and actually making the map different and unique and making all interiors and all that kind of stuff, it is going to have a huge impact on how exactly the team is working. In terms of art development, it's simply a case of pumping out all of the new weapons. Of course, since we're making the high detail models now, it is kind of a bit late to go ahead and change that. But for the clothing, there's going to be a lot of clothing. Customization is something Rocket is really focusing on. The items, like all of the drinks and things you can eat, are things which can be pumped out pretty quickly. The new buildings, the interiors, all that kind of stuff is still a work in progress. The next part of the dev post is actually something which Rocket started on Twitter, which simply meant... The next part of the dev post is something which Rocket started on Twitter, which allowed people to tweet with the hashtag AskDayZ with any of their questions about DayZ Standalone, how it's going to be different and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to include this in the video because there's way too many questions, but I would recommend checking the link in the description below, checking out a full dev post and going ahead and reading through all those yourself. It does have a lot of information which we haven't heard of before. And final paragraph is talking about the regularity for DayZ Standalone updates once it is of course released, and we're expecting to release a new content patch every single week. This of course could change, but once a week is, to be honest, more than I ever expected, and I'm happy to hear that, and I'm sure it's something many people have been wondering about. And also finally, right at the end, it says we're going to be planning many clothing varieties. Like I said, the customization is something Rocket really does want to take key with, because once you get attached to a character, you are, like I said, going to be really sad to watch him or her die. Anyway, that's it for this week's dev post. I will leave a link for the full dev post in the description below. I'd highly recommend checking it out and looking at some of the questions which Rocket was asked on Twitter, since like I said, there's lots of information there which hasn't been talked about before. Please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe and all good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time.